Hello, Wanda.
Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we will start soon, okay? So actually, we'll start right now. Hello, everybody. I'm José Luis Moutinho. I'm the chief business and networking officer of the center. I just forgot my function. Sorry about that. I mean, we've been working on their center for quite a while, developing this network in Fridays. This network Fridays it's co-organized by the BlueMissionAA, the coordination and supporting actions that leads the implementation of the mission ocean and waters by 2030 in the Atlantic and Arctic. And we have a very interesting panel today. And the most interesting thing about this panel is that, these are people, citizens that we could show you that are involved in restoration of the oceans. This is one of the most important goals of Blue Mission AA, our CSA, is to restore and protect our coastal and marine ecosystems and biodiversity. And we really like to hear from people like you, the presenters, what you are doing in terms of protecting the oceans that can be used, that can be a kind of a lighthouse, a beacon, of hope for the other people that wants to help transformative change. So I will pass to Septuan, with the Mentimeter. He wants to ask you some questions. So Septuan, can you please? Yeah, while Septuan is putting online. So the idea is to ask you some questions that you can, let's say, try to help us to reply to some challenges we have in restoring the oceans. So are you ready, Septuan? Yes, you share. Can you share the code of the Mentimeter on the chat, please? Okay, here we are. So a few questions. So if you please connect to menti.com. There's some people that didn't enter. Can you write on the chat, please? Okay, we move on to the next question. We have some question. Well, this is an easy one. Let's move to the next one. Interesting. A lot of people from science and technology. And actually, we have people from in the room from civil society. And then we go to, should we go to the next session? The next question? We have 3 people that never participate in citizen science actions. We have to find them out and try to bring them on board. So should we go to another question? Okay, this is interesting to know that social media plays a key role in, driving citizens to contribute to the better understanding of, our ocean. Basically, most of the people connect primarily through social media. So maybe you could go forward. Well, this is even more interesting because everybody wants to be hands-on action. This is very important. Yes, basically the majority wants to be involved on hands-on actions. This is very important because sometimes it's difficult to move from social media to hands-on actions. How to really, how to really produce concrete results and participate in the meetings. Very interesting. Yes, we also have people that are contributing through the chat. Then we will analyze these questions and add to the final, slides. So should we go on? Yeah. Oh, happy to see that everybody wants to be involved in marine biodiversity conservation. That's very good news. Coral reef restoration. We have a lot of people from Europe and North America, US and Canada. Maybe that's why coral reef is not as high as I thought that it would be, but it's very interesting for marine biodiversity conservation, sustainable fishing. Plastic solutions, of course, is always very high in the priorities of people, seagrass ecosystem restoration, and then coral reef. Good. Could we move on? Okay, so thank you so much for participating in this Mentimeter. We'll get this information and then it will help us for the next sessions. So, well, the idea was to have a full hybrid, event here, but we had some glitches technically, so it will be like a mix of hybrid and virtual. First, we start with Jan Verbeek. Jan, please introduce yourself and well, just start your presentation and change your name. Okay,
Yeah.
so please start.
Thank you very much, Jose. Yeah, like I said, my name is Jan Verbeek. I'm the scientific manager at Sea Forest, which is a Portugal-based environmental impact company that is really looking at the restoration of seaweed or kelp forest habitats in Portugal, but soon also in other regions of the world. So who's starting the presentation?
Let's start the presentation. Can you put the presentation, next presentation?
Okay. There we go. Okay, thank you. So today I'll be speaking a little bit about the work that we've been doing at Sea Forest in the space of citizen engagements in our ocean restoration activities. So I appreciate that there is a diverse audience, I guess. So before I really go into the details, I would kind of like to take a step back, and you could go to the next slide. I think this we are all very familiar with, a forest on land. I think if I would ask, and of course I can't really see hands now as it is a virtual meeting, I think every hand would go up if I asked who has ever been to a forest, right? And if I would ask the question, who has actually contributed to some sort of conservation initiative, then I would also expect several hands to go up, because it is first of all a very easily accessible ecosystem. And something like tree planting as a citizen science activity is very popular. And I think a lot of people have done this. And it's also a reason because people have not just a relationship with this kind of ecosystem based on the knowledge of their value, but because of this kind of emotional connection that we have with these habitats. And again, this is predominantly because they are really accessible to us, and they're often right in front of or in our backyard, right? What a lot of people don't know, and you could change the slide now, is that we have a very similar ecosystem right in front of our coastlines. I think we have some technical issues. I'll just wait for a second. I can see the slides now, yes. Okay, great. Technical issues resolved. We can continue. You could actually skip to the next slide. Didn't need the label yet, but it's fine. So, well, these are also a type of forest ecosystem that we can find underwater in front of our coastlines. These are built, unlike forests on land, these are built by algae. And here we're looking at a type of brown seaweed called kelp. We still have some populations in Portugal, maybe mainly in the north, but they have been disappearing. A lot of people do not have this relationship like they have with forests on land, because these ecosystems are very inaccessible. So again, if I had an audience in front of me, I would ask who has ever actually visited a kelp forest. I'm sure underwater, at least. I'm sure only a few hands will go up, and the same kind of answer I would expect for who has actually contributed to some sort of even ocean conservation initiative, and specifically related to kelps. But this is it's a key issue because people do not have this relationship with these type of ecosystems because it's so inaccessible to them unless you are a diver, a free diver, or someone really working in the marine environment. And without being really in touch with these ecosystems, it's very hard to build that relationship. And that also translates then into people not really caring as much for their protection because they don't really understand the value. And again, this emotional connection, I think, is missing. Even though we have 740 million people actually living within 50 kilometers of a kelp forest, and a lot of these people draw direct or indirect benefits from the services that these ecosystems provide. They are incredibly efficient at sequestering CO2, producing oxygen in the process. They can clean the water from excess nitrogen, for example, that we're emitting into the environment. And one really key thing for kelp forests is that they function as these biodiversity hotspots in the ocean, as well as being nursery and feeding grounds for a lot of fish and shellfish species that we are commercially harvesting. So that has a really big ecological value, but also an economic value. Now, that was already fine. You can skip to that one. Yes. So I think what is really needed to kind of move kelp ecosystems a bit more into the spotlight and get our relationship a bit better with them, like we have it with forests on land. We need education, we need advocacy, and very importantly also for sea forests and its operations is active participation in what we're doing. So before I go into some of the examples of our citizen engagement activities, I just give you a little bit of a description of sea forest in a nutshell. So you could go to the next slide. That's not the next slide. That is. Yes, there we go. So again, the main and only objective that sea forester has is to restore kelp ecosystems for all the benefits that they provide. And we're using innovative seaforestation techniques for this. Here is one of our techniques. It's like kind of our main tool where we seed kelp spores onto small stones in a nursery. We cultivate them for roughly 3 months until they're ready to be deployed at sea. And there we can easily take the stones out on a boat and we can scatter them across a degraded reef from the surface of the ocean, which makes the technique quite scalable. And it also makes it more low cost compared to some traditional methods like transplanting individuals and so on. With the ultimate aim to have a restored forest with a flourishing seaweed canopy. You could go to the next slide. And this is what some of our stones look like. This is in one of our research trials in Peniche. And this is roughly a year after we deployed our stones. So you can still see the stone slightly underneath. Of course, they're a bit overgrown with some other epiphytes, but that's what it looks like in the sea. But obviously, this was small scale and research. But another thing that C4S is doing is technology development of our nursery infrastructure. So you could go for the next slide for that. So these nurseries have kind of two main functions. One is to upscale our capacity of producing these materials because we're losing kelp forest at really big scales and we need capacity to actually treat large scales with our materials. So that is one of the functions. The other one is that it is mobile. Because in a lot of regions in the world, now we're still predominantly working in Portugal, but in the future, we want to spread to the coastline where kelp or other type of seaweed restoration is needed. But in a lot of those places, there's just no infrastructure available. For example, aquarium facilities that could host some of our nurseries. So this is really Sea Forester's way to expand in the future and to have the needed infrastructure ready. So that's really Sea Forest in a nutshell. So now I go into some of the engagement activities that we have been doing over the past few years, as well as what we're planning in the future. So you can go to the next slide, please. So educating the public, we've done a lot of these activities. I'm only presenting 2 examples. And here we're really trying to convey an understanding of the benefits and also the need for action to restore these ecosystems. So on the left, there is, that was quite a fun activity together with the project Programa Atlantis. We invited school children to the beach in Sesimbra before we collected some seaweeds from the local area, brought them to them and really hands-on kind of showed them what these organisms are, why they're so beneficial for the environment, and also explained to them the consequences of losing them from our coastlines. Kids picked this up incredibly well. And afterwards, we even had a chef coming in, and he cooked little treats with seaweeds together with the kids. And that was really, really well received. And I think especially doing these these education activities with kids is really valuable, first of all, to educate them, and they are going to be the people hopefully doing our job in the future. But also they can really take these messages home to their parents, to their family, and really spread it. They can be really a vehicle to make people more aware of the issues that we're having. Another example is a documentary we developed together with the municipality of Cascais called the Blue Forest Return. So there we are also focusing on what sea forests generally doing, but with a particular focus on the Cascais region. And there we interviewed people from the local community, including fishermen, divers, politicians, historians, a person from a hospital in Cascais. And these were more senior people. So they actually had an understanding of the history, because Cascais used to have a lot of kelp in the past, apparently. But around 30 years ago, it started disappearing. And today there's hardly anything left. And it really showed the personal connection of people with these ecosystems, and also them telling the stories of what happened after they disappeared. So I think this is a really nice way to get that, what I mentioned earlier, that kind of emotional connection for people, why they should care about these ecosystems. So we can go to the next slide. The second point, ocean advocates and advocacy. So there we had really great experience working with the surf community, and we've been working for the last 2 years with the World Surf League. We did some athlete activation events in Peniche when they have their yearly contests. And there we invited some of the top athletes together with some community groups to help us. One time we did the construction of these deployment structures for kelps, where they were really engaged. There was a lot of social media coverage about it. And obviously those athletes have a huge following, so they can really amplify the message. In the first year when we collaborated, we also invited some of the athletes to come to our nursery, which is just around the corner from the contest site, showed them how we're producing the materials. They helped out a bit in the process. And then 3 months after, when our cultures were ready, we got together a group of surfers, including Miguel Blanco here on the picture, João de Macedo, Joana Andrade, some Portuguese top surfers, as well as a surf club. And we paddled out. It was quite, first of all, a very fun activity to do, but it really kind of gave a passion for them, because they actually felt like we are actively helping with restoration efforts. It's not going to be like in the future that we have surfers doing all of our deployments. That's not really feasible. But the main thing is that they build this connection, and they can then be ocean advocates. Especially, I mean, in Portugal, and I'm sure in a lot of other regions in the world, surfers are really seen as these heroes, especially for the younger generation. And they can push those messages very well. We can go to the next slide. So active participation in restoration activities. Like I said at the beginning, this is something really, really key for Sea Forester, not just to educate people, but to really have people help us with our activities. So here we're focusing predominantly on two kind of stakeholder community groups. One are recreational divers, and the other one are fishermen. So for the dive community, we have been doing several workshops where we're explaining to them how you can actually identify different types of seaweeds underwater. If you just click one more time, there will be a little pop-up. So we also created this little diver recording forms that they can take down with them. And if they see certain species of seaweed in the ocean, they can record it and give us the data. The real value for us is that the distribution of kelps, or the data of it in Portugal, is very deficient. So we often don't even know where our remaining kelp forests are. And then obviously we don't know where we should target our activities for restoration. A second thing we will be starting soon with the divers is also to teach them in workshops on land, but also in the sea, of how we can actually monitor one of our restoration sites. Because of course we do our own monitoring, but it's a financial and a resource question, right? We can't go diving every single day throughout the season, but the more information and data we can get from a recreational diver, for example, that really helps us in communicating and reporting our impact that we're having to clients, to funders, and the broader community. The second group, and this would be very exciting, we have plans now to start with this next year, is to engage the fishermen as ocean gardeners. So there are two things that we're really targeting. One is to leverage the local ecological knowledge of fishermen, because they really know their coastline, especially when it's more senior fishermen that have worked in the environment for several decades. They know where their rocky reefs are. They know where in the past kelp forests used to exist. They can tell us also their experience with what were the consequences once kelp was lost for your fishing activities. So this is really important knowledge for us, because again, historical data is very poor. But the real value, and that's value to them as well as to us, is that we're planning to actively engage them in our activities by, for example, paying them a day rate or whatever it will be in the end, for them to actually take our stones out to sea and deploy them. So they can be our at-sea infrastructure, so to say. For the fishermen, it's a dual benefit, because first of all, they get an additional income apart from their fishing activities, but they will also then get the benefits from restoring the ecosystem, which they actually help to restore themselves. So there is a dual benefit for them. And I think also it's really encouraging for fishermen to be actively engaged and don't have that feeling, because often when you come with a conservation or restoration project, the fishermen are being pushed out. This is not what we want to do. We want them actively engaged. And I think by them really taking ownership of these activities, they will also make sure that they do not have really a negative impact on that environment with some of their fishing practices. You know, because they have more of a connection to this habitat and they want to see it flourish. So far, we've only had some talks with actually our friend here, Paulo Pina, that's on the picture. But next year, we're going to start some pilot trials of what kind of equipment do we need for the fishing boats to deploy our materials and so on. So I'll leave it with that. You can just go to the last slide, which is just a goodbye slide from my side. So let's replant the ocean together. And I hope you enjoyed that small talk. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you so much. It's really interesting, presentation, a lot of content. I will reserve the questions for the end. I have a lot of questions. One of them I will ask, because the BlueMissionAA is very much linked with innovation. I would like to ask who is like the investor. There could be the potential investors on sea forest to scale up and, let's say, transform you in a global player in terms of kelp forestation. Okay, but I'll get back to you later. So now I would like Luisa, if you are available to make your presentation.
Yes. Yes, I will share my presentation in a minute. Sorry. No, you can't see. Sorry, just yeah, I don't know why it's not showing up now.
You need some time. You could pass to Anna.
Just 1 second. Sorry, I will. I don't know why it's not showing now. Just.
Maybe, Luisa, maybe you can pass to Anna. Yeah.
Yes, maybe. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Anna, are you ready to present?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah, is it working? Okay, can I share my screen?
Yes, please
I
do.
think I can make it. It's this, right? You can see it.
Yes,
It's on presentation mode, I guess. It is?
yes, exactly. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for having me. I am Anna. I am the Climate and Pollution Coordinator at Siena. I don't know how many of you have heard about Siena. Probably not a lot of people. We are Portuguese. We are based in Faro, in the very south of Portugal. Some of you probably have been there. Very nice region. And essentially, we are a marine conservation NGO. We were founded in 2006, and we work towards a marine environment that is healthy, and we envision an informed population that is engaged in the conservation of the marine environment. We work on several areas. We have been doing this kind of internal work of trying to define a bit better in which areas we want to work. I myself started my career as a fisheries and aquaculture policy officer, and I moved on since a few years ago. I moved on to climate and pollution, but we also have very strong area of communication and outreach, which was basically why CNA merged. So we are very, very proud of that area too. We work on several levels. So we work essentially on a regional level on the Algarve region. We are based there. Most of the people that work with us have studied there and do live there. So we have this very umbilical relationship with the Algarve, and we try to maintain a big chunk of our work there. Then we work nationally, which is more or less the level where I'm at. We work with the civil servants, decision makers, and we also work at the EU level and even internationally. Specifically for one of the issues that I'm going to talk about today. These are some of the projects. Then we can talk about these or some of these after my presentation. These are some of the projects that we have, especially in the region of Algarve, especially Marmoto, the first one, and Cianema. They are projects where we try to bring the art and people together. Marmoto is about art, an art exhibition, and Cinema is a movie festival, film festival, and we try to bring everyone into the room and to have their considerations about what worries them in terms of marine conservation. We do a lot of things, I have to tell you. So we are civil society, or at least we do represent a part of civil society, and we do have a lots of types of activism or intervention. Interventions. This was last year, actually, in Lisbon during the UN Oceans Conference. We organized, or we co-organized, the march. The demonstration was really good. It was in June. This was this year, I think, in the Azores. We were delivering a petition to the president of the Assembly of the Azores by then. This was in the National Assembly in Lisbon. This was also in the UN Oceans Conference. These are some of our colleagues that work with us. This was also during the conference in Lisbon. And we do a lot of other things. Obviously, we do a lot of advocacy. This was our former Minister of the Sea. We actually do engage with a lot of members of the government and from the administration, and we are lucky enough to have good relationships with them. And we do a lot of things that include and engage civil society. That's our main goal. So moving on to what I am doing, or what we have been doing in the past few years, we have been kind of wrapping our heads around what working in climate and ocean means to us. And the truth is that nowadays it's really virtually impossible to talk about climate action without talking about ocean action. And why? Because the ocean plays an incredible role in us trying to mitigate whatever effects climate change has for us. So the ocean acts as a mediator of climate patterns. It redistributes heat. We know that more than 90% of the heat produced, excessive heat produced by humans, has been absorbed by the ocean, which is huge. It also works as a carbon pump, carbon It recycles carbon, so it stores more or less 1/3 of the carbon that we emit into the atmosphere. It also has a very big role in terms of oxygen production and biomass production, and that's why we are so focused on it currently. This was actually the report from the IPCC from 2019, where I would say consensually for the first time we got to understand a bit better in a more comprehensive way why the ocean, or how the ocean is so important for climate action. This is a graphic I usually like to show that shows basically what I was saying previously about the heat. So we know that over 90% of the heat that we produce is being captured into the ocean, especially in the upper layer of the oceans, but still it's super, super important. We can say without a doubt that we would not have these living conditions that we have, or it would be impossible for us to habit this country, this planet as we do, if it wasn't for the ocean. I listed some of the threats that the ocean's facing. I'm assuming that you know most of them, or maybe all of them, but up here on the left superior corner, I have deep seabed mining, which is something that I'm going to delve a bit into after. This is a kind of new threat that the ocean is facing, and I can let you know a bit more about it after. Then here we have overfishing and industrial fishing, or excessive fishing, to be more fair. So overfishing for sure is one of the biggest threats that we have, that the ocean is suffering. Then we have plastic pollution here, and I chose to include also bycatch, which is also, you know, it's capturing species that are not targets. So some of these species are already endangered for other reasons, and sometimes they end up being caught unintentionally by fishing gears, and it also has a big impact on those species. So I don't know, you probably have been paying attention to ocean and climate in the news, and the truth is that at least since this summer maybe, we have been bombarded by a lot of news telling us, yes, the ocean is getting warmer and warmer every day. I remember that at least in June and July, every day was a new record, you know. So I received the news, and it was like, okay, today was the hottest day for oceans ever recorded. And then the next day, no, today is the hottest day ever recorded for the oceans. And it was a bit I would say worrying for us, starting to see this in the news so frequently, at least. Then we also had these news. Most of these news are from, at least I would say, mid-year this year until now. Some news also about how the ocean is changing its color, and how the major current of the Atlantic is about to collapse, or may collapse mid-century. Again, a lot of news about how the oceans were getting warmer and warmer. So this is just some examples that are in mainstream media that show us that, yes, the interaction between the climate system and the ocean system is very, very complex. I told you that I wanted to talk a bit about deep seabed mining. I know I don't have a lot of time, but deep seabed mining is one of the things I personally am working for some years now, and I just wanted to let you know that this is something that is really worrying us, because deep seabed mining is not something that exists currently, so as a commercial activity, but we are on the edge of eventually start to see it as a full potential commercial activity, which basically consists on scrapping the deep ocean. So we're talking about depths of 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 meters below the surface of the water. And basically what this technology wants to do, or this industry wants to do, is to scrap big chunks of the deep seabed to extract minerals such as elements such as cobalt, copper, nickel, and others, iron, manganese, all of that. And it's being backed up by the need to transition, as you probably heard. So this has been sold to us, and it has been on the news as something that will help us to move on and to leave fossil fuels for good. This is not entirely the case, and some of the NGOs we have been working with, or I would say most of the NGOs we have been working with, have been very insistent in saying that this is not the case. So we do not actually need deep seabed mining to fuel this transition that we desperately need, because there are a lot of environmental impacts that are not duly assessed until now, and there are other issues that have to do with governance and very opaque governance at the international level. So this is very complex, and I don't have the time to talk about this much, but I would be glad. I would be glad to discuss this in the Q&A sessions. There are a lot of impacts that arise from deep seabed mining. That's why we are so worried about it, and that's why we have to talk about this when we talk about climate change and when you talk about what people can do to stop an imminent threat. I always try to finish my presentations with good news, or at least hopeful news. Let's put it like that. And I have also chosen some headlines from newspaper that tell us that yes, public participation does matter, and it's important that people are engaged and that people pressure their decision makers to make public policies friendlier, at least to the environment and to us, by extension. So these are some of the headlines that I was kind of collecting to give us a glimpse of hope. This is in Portuguese, I'm sorry for that, but this one is about the ozone layer that apparently is recovering from several decades of damage that was inflicted by us. And then we have the Treaty of the High Seas. That was a mark, I would say, during this year. After 2 decades of negotiations, finally it worked, and finally we have something to start, a legal instrument to start protecting the high seas, the international seas. Then we have all of these young people worldwide trying to bring this issue to the courts, which we, Siena, are already doing in Portugal. Last week we launched a court action about this, and then we can also talk about that. And this is also in Portuguese, but I can tell that this is about a moratorium on deep seabed mining that was approved in October in our national parliament. So I hope I didn't exceed my time. I don't think I did. If you are interested in what we do, or if you are interested in learning a bit more about what we do and how you can engage, especially, do follow us on social media. We are very easy to find. I am very easy to find also on LinkedIn, and we can have a chat after. Thank you so much for this, and I hope we can have a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for a very, very inspirational presentation. We'll definitely get back to you very soon. So, Luisa, are you ready?
Yes, I think so, hopefully.
Oh, good.
Okay. So, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. For a start, I just wanted to thank you very much, Luis, for the invitation, and to say that I'm very pleased to be here today to share some of our work on establishing the first network of marine protected areas on Santo Tomé and Príncipe using a co-management approach. I'm Luisa Madruga. I work for Fauna and Flora since 5 years, based on Santo Tomé and Príncipe, and I'm coordinating this project at the national level. So for those who are not very familiar with this amazing corner of the world, Santo Tomé and Príncipe is a small island developing state located in the Gulf of Guinea, Western Central Africa. It's comprised of 2 small islands, Príncipe and Santo Tomé. Príncipe being an autonomous region with its own government, assembly, and administrative structure. And today I'm not, of course, going to explain the project and all of its activities. but rather share some of the lessons learned during our work, and especially related to participatory approaches. So I will try to revise the main activities which may hopefully be useful in similar initiatives and with similar contexts, which are namely the small, relatively small and nearshore coastal MPAs in a small island development state context, when rapidly progressing from no MPAs at all to multiple simultaneous MPAs designations, when working under different scales and governance contexts, which is meaning 2 islands with different governments and administrative bodies. Also in a social, ecologically data poor context, where fisheries is mostly artisanal and largely focused on small pelagics, and where there's the need to meet local and international commitments made by the government. So just to give a very brief context, Santo Tomé and Príncipe is a well-known hotspot for marine biodiversity with a high, but has also a very high dependency on fish for protein, which means that fish is extremely important in terms of food security. However, there's been, over the last years, mostly an increasing reports of declining catch among small-scale fishers, mainly due to overfishing and use of, mainly due to overfishing and use of destructive fishing techniques. And also the fishery sector provides jobs for thousands of people and represents the main source of income, in particular for low-income families after cocoa. So therefore, the importance of marine conservation is clear, not only for preserving understudied and trapped marine biodiversity, but also to secure the livelihoods and well-being of local populations under urgent threat. So these findings from 2 earlier projects carried out separately in each of the islands led to our current project that started in late 2018 and is financed by the Blue Action Fund and Arcadia, and more recently by the Rainforest Trust and Oceans 5. And it's being implemented by a consortium of NGOs, of local and international NGOs, and led by Fauna and Flora. So we have Fauna and Flora, Fundação Príncipe based on Príncipe, Oikos and Marapa based on Santo Tomé. Now, of course, I'm not going to go through all these, but in summary, and as I will talk more about each of the main activities, the MPA co-design, and when I say co-design, I'm talking about defining together location, delimitation, zoning, has been achieved through over 3 years of very comprehensive stakeholder engagement and consultation, with a special focus on fishing communities, but also with both governments, the private sector, civil society, and scientists. And of course, to inform the co-design of MPA network, the key consultations were based on biological and social information collected and overlaid using the marine spatial planning tool Markson with zones, with, of course, the best available scientific knowledge. At the same time, we have been monitoring socioeconomic impacts of the project. And in addition, we have also been supporting livelihood diversification among fishers and fish traders to reduce dependency on income from fishing, since it's been decreasing over the years. So after nearly 5 years of work, including, of course, about 1 year of COVID restrictions, we are now at the stage of having a network of coastal MPAs designated, pending legislation approval at the national level. Starting to talk about our consultation process, and firstly on main enablers and barriers. In the beginning, because of course this was the first attempt to create marine protected areas in the country, we had to overcome a quite strong initial suspicion, and especially a lot of misconceptions about marine protected areas. and of course mainly from the fishing coastal communities. However, a positive aspect was also that since fishers were reporting and were concerned about declining catch, they became quite engaged, at least in general, after the consultations process started, and after informal training on MPAs was provided. Another enabler was the willingness of the autonomous government of Príncipe to designate MPAs, despite some challenge we had in the first years with the national government, which forced us to adapt approaches and develop activities at different pace in the two islands. The main key lessons that I wanted to share, and this about the consultation process, is that, first of all, an extensive participatory process since the beginning can be very time and resource consuming, but it's absolutely vital for ensuring MPA effectiveness. So it's important to take the time, I would say all the necessary time for raising awareness and to build trust and social capital while you are moving forward in the consultation process, and especially, of course, when aiming to create the first MPAs in a country. And also very crucial to never raise expectations or make promises that are not certain, in order to not only create but also to keep long-term trust with the stakeholders. Also, it takes time again, but it's very important to listen to and report fishers' problems, complaints, claims, whatever they have to say, no matter how long it takes before we are actually able to start talking about what we want, which is about ocean protection, and it's linked with declining fish stocks. Also, very crucial is to ensure that take all the necessary time to ensure full understanding by stakeholders, whatever the limitations are. For example, we had a situation, this is only to give an example, we have some difficulty from some fishers that they were not able to read maps very well. So, of course, not even paper maps, so it required more time to work with them on how to read maps and get familiar with scales, north, south, and west, east map orientation, and so on. So, well, actually, yeah, it took us over, like I said, over 3 years. We have had over 400 community meetings in the 37 fishing communities we work with. And these meetings were led by the project team, but always in company of relevant government officials. In addition, we had several meetings with different stakeholders, and very important, 6 general meetings where representatives from all stakeholders in both islands were present. Each of these meetings, I mean, with around, I would say in principle, around 70 people, and on São Tomé with over 100 people, which was quite challenging, but important to seat all stakeholder representatives in the same room. The aim of the consultation process was, of course, first initially to raise awareness on the importance of MPAs as a conservation and fishing management tool, and progressively we also to reach compromises and consensus on MPA locations and zoning. We have produced a video on the importance of the participatory process, which is available both in the website and in the YouTube channel of the project that I can share at the end. So I think that during this process, it was extremely important to invite government officers, including the Coast Guard, to participate in the community consultation meetings, even if this leads to more challenging discussions and requires more time, of course. We also found that some community consultation meetings have achieved effective results when evidence was also provided. For example, having video evening sessions on sustainable fisheries and successful MPAs in other African countries is a nice way of presenting the potential results of marine protected areas, and also to raise awareness in a more, let's say, engaging and entertaining way. Also develop a stakeholder map and assess potential barriers and opportunities, and also develop a political engagement strategy where there are major political hurdles to overcome. This was important, very important in our work, as we had to overcome some political challenges, mostly at the national level in the first years of the project. Also to deal with some issues like gender issues or things like that, we also had to use different engagement formats with stakeholders to ensure inclusive participation. Like I said, for example, to deal with gender issues, we decided at a certain point to also hold separate meetings and consultations with the fish traders, which are nearly 100% women, to understand their points of view and encourage more participation and active participation as well. Because female fisher traders, they often feel misplaced to voice opinions about marine spatial planning and fishing, since their activities are purely land-based, like they sell the fish already on land. And they are always busy with domestic tasks, like with kids, meals, and etc. We also had the same separate meetings in the beginning with spear fishers, who are considered as a different class from line and net fishers. But even if all of these requires, again, more time in the process, but I have to stress that it's very well worth to do it. Also very helpful have been voluntary MPA community ambassadors who contribute to raise awareness among fishers from their own communities. These what we call community ambassadors, of course, they are fishers and fish traders, but that show more enthusiasm about ocean conservation and MPAs in the beginning, and then they can have a very important role influencing their own communities. And also very crucial is that the key results from various activities of the project and data analysis have been always shared through projected presentations with representatives of the fishing communities and project videos screened in all fishing communities. In addition, project reports always shared with the government, including high-level government staff that are not always informed by our government focal points. So a lot of transparency involved also. As for data collection, the main barriers was actually, like I mentioned in the beginning, was to have an important lack of socio-ecological data in the country. So we had to compile all the existing data and also to collect new data to fill knowledge gaps. So we are talking about compiling and collecting ecological, fishing, socioeconomic, tourist data to inform the mark sunweight zones that we worked to design the MPAs. The ecological data included coastal habitat mapping, just to give a general idea, marine turtle nesting and feeding areas, use of BRAVs, of paid remote underwater videos for fish abundance and diversification, observation of cetaceans in specific sites, also basic information on sharks and seabird tracking. We also compiled the information from all the studies already carried out in the country to develop the first inventory of marine and coastal biodiversity of the country, which is already available in our website. When it comes to fishing data, together these data we undertake since the first year of the project fish landing surveys, also using a participatory approach, because we hire fishers and fish traders in each community to collect data twice a week from their colleagues arriving from their fishing trips at the shore. These community agents are firstly, of course, trained, and then they are regularly supported by a project team member that follows up their work. Besides that, we had previous data from vessel tracking involving fishers carrying portable high-value GPS tracking devices during all their fishing activities to shed some light on their fishing movements around the islands. And we are planning to do this once again. So I think the most important lessons when regarding the data collection is that there will always be more and better data to be collected, but time is limited, particularly when engaging stakeholders that are keen to see things move forward. So I think it's important to be ready to clearly communicate what information is being used to the stakeholders in general, acknowledge potential limitations, and explain the value of evidence available despite some uncertainty sometimes. So given the wide range of stakeholders we were involving and the varying background skill sets they had, we think that oversimplifications or lack of transparency about the process or evidence used might be criticized for lack of scientific credibility, for example. So another aspect which is very important is for accountability and engagement is to include stakeholders in the data collections, like the example I just gave, like we have fish landing surveys being carried out by fishers and fish traders. And they are people that are recruited in the fishing communities. Also very important is our feedback loops. Feedback loops basically means that we should always bring the results of data analysis or videos from activities such as the BRUFs, for example, back to the communities, so they are aware of not only what we are doing, but understanding the importance and the work and why we request sometimes information and so on. Also, the socio-economic monitoring of the project is essential as reducing access through the MPAs must be understood and monitored so that mitigation measures can be implemented and adjustments can be made. So we undertook biennial national scale household surveys in 2019, 2021, and again 2023. And these are led by enumerators, which are local people, of course, employed by the project, and we have reached now in all these years nearly 6,000 respondents to show how communities' attitudes towards marine conservation and towards MPAs have evolved. Talking about the co-design of MPAs using the Mark-Sun zones, and very quickly, I don't know if everybody's familiar with the Mark-Sun, but it's the most widely used conservation planning tool, I think. And the main lessons from these has been that using a decision support tool like Mark-Sun really helps surface the available information and identify data gaps and also constraints, but it should never become the driver of the process. The stakeholder consultation and local knowledge of fishers and others should not be overshadowed by a more technical process. So both their knowledge and needs should inform the targets in Mark-Sun instead. Also, it's important to allow time to discuss input data and outputs, including constraints and limitations, and ideally present multiple scenarios back to the stakeholders. So reporting stakeholder feedback is key to ensure transparency of the marine spatial planning process as well. And as the consultation process was maturing, we started also to organize MPA, what we call assembly meetings, and we call it assembly because it reunites representatives from all stakeholders, like I already mentioned, to progressively select MPAs based on the marks and maps, and report feedback to ensure transparency of the marine spatial planning process. Sorry, I don't know why I can't. It's not going to. No, why? So as a result, we progressed from a map with all the potential MPAs suggested by the marks analysis to a preliminary selection of some of them during co-management assembly meetings with all the representatives from the relevant stakeholders, to the final selection reached by compromises and consensus among representatives of all stakeholders. These decisions include, of course, not only the location, but also the delimitation and zoning of the MPAs, and exactly the same process on São Tomé Island. And also, finally, when it comes to livelihood diversification that we are also supporting, I think it's important to highlight that we should ideally start supporting livelihood diversification at the same time as the consultation process. Also, assess most impacted fishing communities to provide support to livelihood diversification. In addition to previous work done on other projects, we plan to implementing additional vessel tracking, involving, again, fishers carrying portable IoT GPS tracking devices during all their fishing activities. So we have some idea on their fishing movements around the island, which will enable us to determine which communities, gear user, or other distinct groups are most vulnerable to the impacts of spatial restrictions. And these impacts are to inform livelihood interventions and management decision making. Also, general training on business planning and management is crucial before establishing new small businesses with the beneficiaries. We also think important that business initiatives should always be proposed by fishers and fish traders within a set of course, sustainable criteria, which is previously defined. And the selection criteria and approval of proposals for this small business, for alternative or livelihoods, must be totally clear and transparent. This is also very important. And of course, and to finalize, the next step, the next phase of the project is under development, but it's focused on consolidating the MPA network. So to ensure the promise of MPA designation is fulfilled, it is now essential that these new MPAs are effectively managed and that robust enforcement mechanisms are established and implemented for these new MPAs to become effective, rather than another paper part that we are all of us are probably quite familiar with. I'm sorry. Also, resources and capacity and of government and local community stakeholders to ensure effective management and enforcement. Since we're talking about the co-management approach, is also very relevant. Otherwise, we have a risk that the enforcement decides remains low. So this project will address this gap by working with communities and government on São Tomé principle to build capacity, regulations, and co-management mechanisms required for these new MPAs to become effective. The process will demonstrate the practicalities and benefits of marine protection, laying hopefully a sturdy foundation to further expand the MPA network in the future. I think I will end my presentation for now, because I might have taken a bit of time. If you need any information or want to know more about the project, please get in touch. You have my email there. There's also the website and the YouTube channel and a story map that we created for the project. So I'll be more than happy to respond to any queries anyone has. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Luisa. Very comprehensive presentation on I mean the challenges and opportunities to create MEPAs in São Tomé and Príncipe. Very interesting. We should go back to you soon, but now we go to Eugenia. I mean, she will present. She'll make a presentation.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation. Okay. So I'm Eugenia Barroca. I'm the regional representative for Europe and Lusophony of Sustainable Ocean Alliance, SUA. And for those listening that are not familiar as well of the organization, so I'm going to start by a brief presentation of our general work and then try to dive deep in this topic that brought us here together of the restoration of ecosystems. And so our main focus is to restore ocean. Next slide. Sorry. Thank you. Our main focus is to restore ocean health, and everything started in around 2014 when Daniela Fernandez, and she was still an university student, 19 years old at the time, when she created the organization exactly with this goal to give a seat at the table of the decision-making processes to youth, because we were not being considered in these decision-making processes, and these decisions will impact all our lifetime. So it's important that we have this participative approach. And more than that, next slide. We've been also trying to fight climate change, one solution at a time. So with a big focus on accelerating ocean solutions and different types of it. So until now, we have this total of 376, but they are from different types. Next slide, please. So some are for profit, like the startups, ocean technological startups, that we started with an accelerator program in the beginning that at the time was the first accelerator program focused on ocean sustainability only. Now, happily, we have plenty of these programs already, and that's great. So we transitioned that program to a different concept that I will present you further. And then the majority of the solutions that we have been supporting are the grants program that are more grassroots and community-based projects with a big diversity. So here we have a sum of numbers of the different impacts we have of all these projects together. In terms of the emissions of the carbon dioxide reduced or avoided, or even kilometers of coastline that were monitored, jobs, blue jobs created, attached with these projects and companies as well, and all the waste that was removed, upcycled, or avoided as well. Next slide. And this is a snapshot of our community. So even that SUA is based at United States, we have a global community. So around 7,000 leaders in more than 180 countries. But then actively, we have groups of youth that are called the SUA hubs. So these groups are usually led by youth between the 18 and 35 years old. And they can act at national level or regional level or even local level to a city or university based. So we have 84 of these groups in 44 different countries. And these are the youth that a lot of time is bringing to action and to reality these solutions in terms of the grants projects as well. And then we have the ecopreneurs, that is like entrepreneurs but committed with bringing a positive impact in nature, and these ones are bringing also solutions to reality, but from the startup side. Then we created this network of ocean investors that support these solutions as well, We have a group of policy advisory members that help us in our policy campaigns, and then a big network of mentors that give individual mentorship sessions and support to all these members in our community to amplify and develop their solutions further. Next. This is a snapshot of our diversity. So we have a slightly bigger majority of female leaders. The average age is 27 years old, and we have a representation of 10% of indigenous communities. Next slide. And the big challenge we are solving, it's that we are running out of time. So there is this prediction that of loss of human lives due to climate change. And basically, as we all know, the planet is in a rapid state of decline. Governments are not making the fast enough decision-making processes or innovating fast enough. And a lot of people feel a little bit lost on how to act to solve these problems. So our approach is to exactly invest in people and funding these solutions. By investing in people, we are trying to create this community for nobody to feel alone on their own and to feel connected. Even that, for example, it's a regional level, but they can connect from Portugal to Mozambique and to Brazil and be working in a similar project and change ideas and evolve their projects as well. And then the funding, that is essential, right? To have the needed resources to apply these solutions. So just highlight on a policy case, the policy campaign we have been dedicating the most for the last years, that Ana Matias already talked about, because actually at the national level in Portugal, we partner a lot in this topic to ask for a moratorium on deep sea mining and protect the deep sea from these potential threats. But we started to work on this campaign for 4 years already, and we are working at the international level. So, and already a lot of incredible movements and results were achieved. For example, the group of youth that is in France transitioned their hub, also created a specific project just on this topic, that is the Look Down Action. And they were able to, from dialogues and different protests with their government. And in France, so Macron, the French president, passed from a pro-mining president to a leader on defending the deep sea from this activity. So he's against deep sea mining in national waters and defending a moratorium in international waters. So this is the proof that if civil society talks and creates this dialogue and with scientists and politicians and everyone together, we can make a difference. And now we have been evolving there are already 24 countries in this wave of change asking for a moratorium. We just need a little bit more to be able to, at the international level, that is in the International Civil Authority, to apply this moratorium effectively. And next slide. So back to what I talked in the beginning, what we transitioned, the accelerator program, we have this ecopreneur network that is basically, instead of having a limited cohort on time, that the startups participate just for a couple of months, now they have this lifetime support and these several benefits that you can see of mentorship, funding, connections and networking, and basically several resources to be able to amplify the scale of their businesses and to move it to the different level, basically. And these are the big focus of the main 5 areas that SUA has been focusing on impact areas, due to the startups area, the ecopreneurs, but also to the communities and the grants area and the hubs. So it's the first one is in terms of green gas reduction, like blue carbon projects and CO2 removal and avoidance. The second one is pollution reduction, circular use, waste removal and avoidance. Third one is ecosystems and species restoration or preservation. That is the main focus here today. And blue foods as well, fisheries, aquaculture, and seafood alternatives. And last but not least, ocean data literacy and research. As we are here to talk more about ocean restoration, I'm going to just share with you some of the projects that we had on this topic 3, that is the ecosystem and species restoration. Next. So here is an example of a grantee, connected also with what Jan presented earlier. This is a grant project that focuses was together with the Kelp Forest Foundation, was a PhD student that developed this project, and basically is trying to understand and measure the biogeochemical impact cultivated of the giant kelp on the coast of Namibia. And with this process, they would be able to better manage and understand the impact, and to manage the expansion of these species in their coastline. And another example of projects also in the restoration is coralites. This one is in Anambas, Indonesia. We have several projects in different places of the world. I was just trying to show some of them to tell you, especially with corals, we have a lot of them. But this one is in Anambas, Indonesia, and they've been actively trying to restore damaged coral reefs. But I'm aware of projects that we also have in like Sri Lanka, Bahamas, like in several countries as well. And then also another important coastal ecosystem is the mangroves. And this is an example in Zanzibar in Tanzania, that the SUA hub, SUA Tanzania, developed this big action with the local community and different stakeholders to be engaged and to effectively plant and restore this ecosystem. So they plant 1,000 mangrove seeds, and they've been trying to also increase the monetization of this ecosystem to improve their growth, and definitely the carbon removal from the ecosystem. That is the biggest benefit that this ecosystem gives, besides coastal protection for exactly these extreme events that have been increasing the frequency as well. And then on the part of the startups, this is an example of a business model like Coral Vita. They are based in Bahamas, and they are growing corals as well, but putting them back in the ecosystem, trying to restore and speed up the restoring rate. And they sell these, they make this a profitable business by selling this service to who is getting services from the ecosystem directly, but they also have a big active education area, like with the community. They invite schools and other parts of the community to attend and to be aware of what the work they are doing. So this was basically a snapshot of some of the restoration projects that we are working on. But definitely, if you are interested to be part first of this global community, it's not only for youth, it's for everyone. So feel free to reach out and also to follow our work and be part of this positive change to restore the ocean health. And thank you.
Thank you, Eugenia. Again, I mean, 4 fantastic presentations. And you know, one of the questions we are here is about motivation. I will start while I move to be closer to Jan and Eugenia. I mean, I would like to ask Luisa and Anna, why you're doing that? What's your motivation? What is it? What brings to you as a person, as a citizen, to be involved in all these projects?
Maybe, I don't know, can I go? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Well, there's not a straightforward answer, to be honest. I think that as most of us in this room today, we feel powerless. A lot of the times we feel powerless by everything that's happening in the world in terms of environmental conservation or the lack of environmental conservation. So at least from my side, what drove me to this was, how can I help? You know, how can I put my brains into it? How can I use my skills and everything I've learned from school and from college and everything? How can I put my skills and my knowledge and my drive for good use? And that's essentially it. I think that as for most of us, probably we are just trying to do whatever we can with what we got, I think. And essentially for me and for us at Siena, that's what drives us. We see the ocean as kind of, even though it covers 70% of the planet, it's maddening if you think that it has so little attention, you know. Most of the conservation actions are focused on land, and I do understand that because that's where we live, but still it's 70% of the planet. So why were we spending so many centuries sending everything we don't want into the ocean and just expect it to vanish. It's not going to happen. So we have a lot of centuries to catch up. You know, we have a lot of things to do because of all the things we have been doing and the things we are still doing. So we are just trying to catch up. That's from my point of view.
Thank you. What about you, Louisa? Why you
Well, I think, yeah, I think we are all moved by the same cause. Let's say. I've been working for conservation for many years now, and I can't imagine myself doing something different. I think it's feeling that although of course sometimes the especially if you watch the news, it can be the scenario can be very drastic and frustrating, right? But I think we have a role. Every single person has a role to play. But if you can do more with the means that you get, yeah, and with your knowledge, experience, whatever. If you can contribute a little bit, I think this is already important. And I totally agree with Anna when she says that much more attention has always been paid to the land than to the ocean. I mean, now we are in the ocean decade, but it's not always been like this. So I think the ocean is not only has a crucial role, like for climate change, which is the biggest risk we are facing at the moment, but also it's the most understudied still for obvious reasons. So we are. I think this is also very appealing, right? That we are trying to contribute to ocean conservation. Which is when we are talking about ecosystems that are so unknown yet at a certain level. Yeah.
Thank you. What about you, Eugenia and Jan? Why are you doing that?
Why are you doing that?
It's a very important question.
Good question. I mean, I think at the beginning it was curiosity from my side. I mean, I started diving when I was 10, I think, and I always loved being in the sea. I mean, I'm from Germany, very landlocked region of Germany, but I had lovely parents who would always take us on holidays every year. And I think it was more of a passion at the beginning. That's why I then went into marine science in academia. But then I think I saw, well, because of my university degree, I really saw what the issues are that we're facing. So I think at some point my curiosity shifted more to a feeling for I want to be part of a solution to actually recover something. I didn't really know at the time what that would be. I spent a lot of years also in the UK, working for an environment agency, also looking at how the habitats are changing, and finally found then my niche in habitat restoration. Because there I really feel like, and again, then I was planning to do this actually as an academic career, but soon realized like with an organization like Sea Forester, it can be quite an impact I can make rather than just some research studies, which are crucially important, but I feel more that I have an actual impact even in a community because we're working with local communities rather than just doing the science that is backing it up. And I think the ocean just has such a huge potential to support our development in the next couple of decades to come. And yeah, it's both passion and knowing that I can actually contribute to change.
Good. You look really passionate about that.
I do.
That's good. What about you?
I feel really connected with what Jan shared but I'm from Portugal, so all my childhood was by the beach, connected to the ocean, and that was like kind of a family member, like while I was growing up, the sea with a family, and that grew up a passion on it, and it made me pursue these. First, I thought I wanted to follow science, like to better understand the patterns and to make more discoveries, because a big percentage of our ocean, we still don't know it yet, especially the deep sea, that is the biggest biome in our planet. And I thought I wanted that, but then I felt while I was studying, I understood that a lot of the things that we had already discovered were not being applied in the society, were close in the academia and more in the university level. So that's when I defined that I wanted more, and I defined really to work with NGOs, because I felt they were the type of organization that could connect the science to the decision-making process, to the communities. And that's where I feel like as well happy, like with the present impact with SOA, is that we can have these like global connection to this global community, like nobody feels alone, like because we can find similarities even with different types of ecosystems, but sometimes with similar, like on opposite places of the planet. And what really unites us is this one ocean that we are all taking care of, basically. And it's good that I feel that is the biggest point is that even that we have all the other species to protect, is our species that we need mainly to change the behavior and to mainly make it impact and shift. So it's good, this focus that we have on humans to be the actors of this positive change, to a bit counterbalance with what we have been doing until now, is exactly what we can be. I usually say that we can be this destructive virus or this essential enzyme to restore the life again. So it's basically this shift that we are doing, like human by human, solution by solution, and organization by organization, all together trying to make this shift and have positive impact.
Well, good, great responses. So I have a question for Luisa that Valerie made. It's, I mean, how can you manage the expectations of the, I mean, fishermen in São Tomé and Príncipe? Meaning, I mean, how can we like convince them, like what is called deferred gratification, you know, to, let's say,
Yes.
invest now for the future? How is that possible?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's not easy at all. It was not easy at all, and we still, well, I would say, well, it's much better, but still sometimes we still have to struggle with some discontent from specific people. But I would say, first of all, like I explained, through a very comprehensive and very long, taking all the necessary time, very long engagement and consultation process. So it took us, like I said, over 3 years before we could co-design the MPAs. So I think this is part, and we did a lot of different types of consultation meetings, a lot of training, video screening on successful MPAs. We did a lot of activities related to that. This is part to demonstrate the real importance of the MPAs, not only for marine biodiversity conservation, but also, which is of course related, to decrease to at least mitigate the declining fish stocks that fishers and fish traders were complaining so much about. This on one hand. On the other hand, it's important I didn't mention this here because but there's a lot of detail. But one of the criteria that we used when we did the Markson analysis was that at least 80% of the fishing grounds, because we had collected fishing data already, so we knew where they were fishing and what kind of fishing gear they were using, what species they were catching, and so on. So that at least 80% of fishing grounds would not overlap with marine protected areas. So they still have a lot of ocean, let's say, to coastal areas, not ocean in general, but like coastal areas. They still have a lot of coastal areas to fish. And also there is something else, which is except one, all the marine protected areas that have been co-designed, they include both no-take area, but also a sustainable use area, which allows certain types of fishing, but only a very reduced number of fishing gear, and only the ones that are considered as sustainable. So this also it also helps that that fishers would accept progressively they would start to accept that and realize that, well, there's something we have to do, and maybe this can be a good solution. And also, like I mentioned, supporting other aspect to have some buy-in from fishers was to start, like I mentioned, very important to start supporting livelihoods as soon as we start the consultation process. Of course, now we want to expand more the support to livelihood diversification, because now we know exactly which communities will be most impacted, and before we didn't. But still, it's very important to start supporting livelihood diversification from the start, from when you start the consultation process at the same time. So they feel that they have, I wouldn't say a compensation, because it's not, and it's not meant to be a compensation, but it's something else that they can, some source of income that they can rely on. But yes, it was not an easy process. Many years of work.
And in a nutshell, consultation, communication were key, you know, for the outcome of your project.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a question on the Q&A for Jan. Where do you get your funds from? Who are your clients?
Well, I think it's still quite a mix. So at the beginning, we started with government grants for research projects. We still have a certain component where we still are in collaborations with research projects here in Portugal. But we also shifted a bit more to NGOs, like the World Wildlife Fund has supporting us now for the past 3 years. First with project funding, now they're helping us a bit with communication strategies and so on. But we also started having sponsorships from corporations, smaller industry entities, because those are, it's often for SDGs, sorry, not SDGs, for their internal reporting, right?
Yes.
That they do something good for nature. There is really a push also from the general public, because they want to see their loved brands to do something good for the environment. So this is mainly then based on some form of sponsorship. But now we're also moving more into the area what was explained earlier, for example, with Coral Vita. So they get the money basically from the people that they're restoring a service for. Now, I think we still have some way to go. We have some interest already, because there's one company that's, well, it's still confidential, but they're looking at their supply chain. So, and restoring these habitats will really benefit their supply chain in the future. So we also need more larger corporations to really understand this and really see that if you do something right at the start of your supply chain, you can really safeguard what you need into the future. So there is still a lot of development that we need to do on our side, looking at different financing streams. But there are also now things like biodiversity credits being developed, carbon credits. Well, they don't exist for kelp forests yet. They might exist in the future. Carbon credits are always a little bit controversial, right? So this would not really be our main avenue, but the biodiversity credits, that's something we're really looking into now, because in the EU there is legislation now that corporations and entities really have to report on their impact on biodiversity, and there will be much more funding available from that side as well. So still quite a blended mix of different sources.
So this, for me, these questions are very practical questions. We spend 2 days, I have people who participate in this meeting here in the audience. We spend 2 days discussing how can we help to create a pipeline of innovation within the context of the marine restoration.
Yeah.
And feedbacks like yours is very important. We'll get back to you soon again to ask more questions. But what we are trying to provide as a project, as a coordination and supporting action funded by the European Union, is, an environment where companies and individuals like you can showcase the projects, they can get funding to find clients, basically create a matchmaking environment where you can really benefit from this potential growth of the market. So for us, and the first time I heard from Forest was your founder, Paul Bakken. Yes, 5 or 6 years ago, he's trying to explain me what he was trying to do in Cascais. For me, it was Paulo Vergassi, and I said, what are you trying to do here? It was very interesting. And their center, Frank Neumann, he worked at their center for 1 year.
He did.
Yes. So he really introduced us to on kelp forest, and then I've been completely addicted to everything related to kelp forest restoration. But then I'm going back now to Eugenia. A very simple question for people young like you. I mean, how did you start? Sometimes you have your motivation, but how do you start doing these kind of things? What was the very first step that then progressed and then pushed you to the situation you are right now?
First, is to be aware of that motivation and to bring it to action. And I started while I was still in high school by starting to be volunteer in some environmental organizations close by where I was living. That was in Porto. And then I went to university in the Algarve, and I kept being a volunteer in different type of organizations. And I started to apply to international organizations as well, to work online and remotely with youth all over the globe and to learn with their feedback as well. And that was how it started. So basically, as a citizen, and also engaging in a lot of activities from Ciência Viva that they did at the time, open to the public. So I would always subscribe and participate, everything that was ocean related. And from that actually was where I started the network and knowing more organizations, more projects, getting involved, and then participating in a different level. So I feel that especially to youth that are still studying, it's a great moment of our life to dedicate our weekends or our extra times to have, because basically when I finished my studies, I already had a curriculum, but on only volunteering experience, but already with practical experience on the areas that I wanted to work on. So that was kind of an advantage to join the market when I went searching for jobs after finishing the studies. So I truly recommend that. And especially I feel that a lot of youth gets confused. Some are not certain of exactly what they want, or they like a lot of things. So just go to try everything, basically, and choose one weekend for every different area. And then with the practical experience, I think we have a better idea of exactly where we feel better, what we like the most, and where we can bring a better impact as well. So
but you respond only 90% of my question. The 10% that is left. Let's zoom in your high school. What was the very first activity that you participate, and how did you know about this participation? Who invited you to participate?
So exactly, the first ones I wasn't invited. I signed up. I volunteered. So I searched and I found. And one I remember it was English. Okay, so in Ciência Viva, I remember that was the Seed for Society project. It was a 4-year project with the European funding. And they did, on the first year, I think, I'm not sure now, but I think in 14 different European countries, but in several countries, I'm not sure about the number. But they did sessions with the citizens and sessions with the stakeholders. And I registered as a citizen, and I went. I remember it was here in Lisbon, and we had people from different backgrounds. I think I was one of the youngest. There was other teenagers, but maybe more too. But then the majority was people already working in the maritime transport or aquaculture, science, different backgrounds, but everyone was ocean interested. And we were kind of asked about different challenges and what would be our proposals of solutions. And then some years after, 2 or 3 years after, I was already in the university. And at that moment, I was invited to go to Brussels with other colleagues of mine to be in the final presentation of the project to the European Parliament. And in that moment, we were together with different European youth, kind of making the summary of the results of all the different countries of the citizens and so on, and to bring a final proposal to be. I remember I feel a lot of pressure because I really thought things would be concrete, like proposed, executed, and results. I was naive like that, but I felt kind of the pressure of having to say what all the Portuguese youth wanted me to say, because I was the only Portuguese there. So I felt kind of that pressure, but now I can manage it better. And that's why I feel it's really important that we create dialogues and for people to share their opinions. And then I understood that things take time, but actually I just want to highlight this, that I feel that example and others that I leave as the All Atlantic Ocean Ambassadors program that I was also part of it, and other different international programs that I participated in.
Sigge Gruber is online.
Yeah,
she's online.
Yeah,
Sigge Gruber.
Oh yeah, she's wonderful. She was she was the
She's
mother
of
this
watching
program.
you.
Yeah, she was the
I
mother
was
of this
waiting
program.
to mention.
Yeah, but the truth is, all these programs, I feel that they are kind of already a result of the first contact I had with this ocean policy. I got frustrated at first because I was like, where are the results? Where are the changes? But now when I look back and I zoom out a bit, I can see that like I'm kind of already a generation or a representation of who is benefiting from these changes, because all these programs didn't exist in the past, and now are kind of bringing a voice and bringing opportunities to network, to funding, to projects concretization. And I feel I know this is already a reflection of the works of the past decades for everyone that's been focusing this ocean change. So it takes time for us to understand, but we can feel it like with time. And especially, I hope that the marine ecosystems feel it in a positive way soon.
Thank you very much. So now I have another question for Luis. I guess Anna had to leave. Anna, it should be the opposite. But what can us in the European space, the marine protected areas is maybe a little bit more structured. We have much more funds, certainly. The process started a long time ago. But no, what we are doing is absolutely fantastic, fabulous work. So, what could you take from you that we could use in Europe and otherwise as well? We really like to listen. How can you help us out to implement our marine protected areas?
Yes, I think, in terms of data, I think, of course, in general, in Europe, there's much more scientific data available, which is very helpful. On the other hand, I feel that although now people talk a lot about participatory processes and common decision making, I think we still have. That's my feeling, that there's still work to be done when it comes to participatory approaches. It's nice to have in your project or concept notes or whatever that you are using a participatory process, or that are using a co-management approach. But it's actually, it has to put in practice. And I think this is the main issue. It's done with a few. In some cases, it's done with a few meetings, and it's not a real participatory process. And then of course, it's by law. It's made public, and people can provide feedback, but still, it's not being done like all together since the beginning, right? Like, okay, we want to, there's a need to expand, for example, to meet the 30 by 30 target. We need to expand our MPA network, for example. Then let's sit together first and see where and how, where it makes sense and how it can be done. And I think this still misses in most of the processes of creating new and expanding MPA networks in Europe. So I think that's probably the biggest lesson, I would say.
Co-creation and participation in the process.
Yes. But it takes a long time. So to involve everyone, to reach consensus. It takes a long time, and it's hard work actually, because there's so many different interests from different stakeholders, and especially from the most impacted stakeholders. But at the end, I think it's worth. But of course, needs time, and sometimes I think for one reason or another, the decision makers don't have this time. But it should be done.
Yeah. One thing that this co-participation is interesting, because what I'm saying that this must be really a continuous process. Is that correct? I mean,
yes.
From scratch, and then even after implementing,
even after.
Yes. Good.
Yes, that's what we are aiming to. It's also to have now that we are shifting our focus to from the designations from the MPA designation to implementation, and this and involves a lot of steps like sustainable finance mechanisms for the MPAs, socio-ecological monitoring, the management plans, and defining a management structure for the MPAs. We want to keep following this co-management approach. So we really want that it's not only the government in charge of doing surveillance and enforcement. Of course, we know that only the authorities have the power of applying fines and doing some type of enforcement, but there's a lot that other stakeholders can do together, right? Not only the government, but creating mechanisms where fishers can have a role, especially on surveillance, civil society, other NGOs, so they can all work together. And there are successful cases in the world of this, so it's nothing new, but that's the way we want to continue to work in this project in the country.
Thank you. Now I go back to Jan. I mean, there is a study from the Society of Ecological Restoration about the barriers for restoration and the funds, I mean, technical skills, protocols, I mean, clients. So now that in the case of kelp forest, and specifically sea forester, what are the biggest barriers, the three most important barriers for your business to grow and to become global?
I think, well, we are a company, so it's always a little bit difficult to leverage the right funding. It's not that there is no funding available, but we are still, I'm not claiming we have a fully developed approach. We're still doing a lot of research, a lot of testing. We still have a lot of issues in the sea after deployments, and this is not a stopper. We just still need time and the right finance to actually develop all these different things. Often, if it's government grants or other type of finance, we're very squeezed into a certain direction of, you get a call, you have to match yourself to the call. It's not necessarily what we need to do to actually get to the point where we want to be in the next few years. So I think funding, but also the type of funding that is an issue. So we are quite lucky now with some partners where they do sponsorships. So they just say, here's our money, report on what you use it for, but use it for what you need it for, I think it's maybe not so much a barrier. It depends a bit on in what country you are. Permitting a legislation can be a bit of a barrier. I mean, we are also applying for other permits at the moment. It's still purely based on research to get an authorization. I think in Portugal, in a few months, we will have that permit. But we also already had discussions with, for example, the Crown Estate in the UK, because we had a good link now with them through who were finalists in the Earthshot Prize 2 years ago. So Prince William is our friend now, which is nice. So we had a good link to the Crown Estate. They are very on board with this. They're quite enthusiastic, but the red tape you have to go through to even just throw a stone in the water there, much more difficult than Portugal. So I think for us, once we really spread to other countries, that kind of permitting barrier will come up more and more. And the third, I think it kind of translates again from missing finance that we need to build capacity. So we're still quite a small team. We generally operating through partnerships with other like Maripiel and Peniche, where we have a nursery. We have a team of lab technicians and field technicians. Without them, nothing of this would be possible. But we really need to build in-house capacity, and that's still being a barrier very often to accept new projects and so on. But I think those would be the main three.
In terms of the permit, you mentioned Cascais. How long it took to get the permission in Cascais?
At the beginning, this was all on associated to research projects, so that's easy. The research project, we had some together with CCMA in the Algarve, also CCMA in Porto, and some other universities and institutes in Portugal. And there it's either ECNEF, where you get your permit from. And for this type of research project, it's not really a big problem. I think it's once we now want to go larger scale, because we have a technique that does work. There's a lot of optimization to be done, but we also need to test this on large scales to see, how that behaves. The bigger you go, especially as a company, I think the first question we were asked is this a commercial activity now? So if it's a commercial activity, there's a whole other process involved. It's not quite a commercial activity yet. But so those were, so it's in between. I think when it's really research-based, it is fairly easy to get the right permits. Once you move into a commercial side of things, then it's where it gets tricky. I mean, maybe we showed that I'm a little bit old, but I still remember first time I came in Portugal, I still remember Cascais full of macroalgae. I only know that from anecdotal evidence. I mean, I've only been here for 4 years.
I still remember. My youth was in north of Brazil. I mean, in Recife. My mother is from Pernambuco, and the whole beach smells so good. For me, it's so good. The algae everywhere. And the first time I came over here, it was covered with algae here. I really enjoyed it, but everybody was complaining.
Maybe that's another barrier, because a lot of people think seeing it as this icky thing at the beach.
Exactly. I still remember it was fantastic. I was surprised with this huge algae. So maybe we're getting we're getting very close to our time. There is a chat. There's a question for. Oh, sorry, 2 questions. Well, Eugenia, let's see over here. Is it different kind of outreach for citizen engagement to indigenous people versus, say, urban dwellers?
No, it's like in terms of outreach, we make it in a kind of fluid way. So it's basically people join our events or join our community or the hubs. The hubs are exactly the groups that have more contact with the communities and make like local actions with the people itself. So from that, more people get engaged, and then it's not so we don't have a different strategy of outreach. We try to have an approach of listening and understanding everyone's perspective, and every hub has this independence on defining what they think is the biggest challenge in their country or in their city or in their region. And that's the ocean challenge that they will tackle. So they have this independency. So same for both scenarios, as in an indigenous community or a city urban group. So they would define what is the biggest challenge that they have to tackle, and we would gather the resources to support them.
We still have 2 more questions for you again, Eugenia. What is the more effective format to? It's André, he's here with us in the room, like Valerie. So, what's the most effective way of engaging? I mean, these stakeholders, seminars, workshops, meetings.
Honestly, I feel that it's give them this freedom and independence on they going to the field and do the project that they want. In my perspective, I feel that this direct action is often much more motivated. And we saw in the beginning of the event, everyone wanted to go hands-on. And that's what I feel that like this model that SUA is applying, it kind of gives this, like you have mentors to support you if you don't feel like safe with the knowledge skills that you have, like to guide you in terms of the project development. And then you have this funding, but you are each individual, each citizen are the project manager, and they make their team, and then they execute it themselves. And I feel that this is the most effective. Obviously, surveys and workshops and webinars. All of this has value in terms of ocean literacy and like communication and outreach, but I feel that we need more and more like direct action, concrete impact, because it's fundamentally education, but we need more action now than talking, for sure.
Less social media, as they
Yeah.
say. So thank you. So before going to the final question to Luisa, I have another question to Jan. Is what the regulatory constraints you face to plant in the sea? How to scale up to all Europe?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit touching on what I was explaining earlier. The experience we have now is that it's a very new thing to do, especially as it's known that, okay, if a research project does that, yeah, they do some smaller areas, they get some results, fine. But now that we are asking for large areas to do this, they don't quite understand what we're actually proposing. So we had several meetings now to even explain to them what the technique is doing underwater, that no, it does not have a negative impact, because sometimes you ask for an environmental impact assessment. It's like, well, our activities are improving the environment, right? So there's not really that kind of assessment needed. And it's so, because it's a very new discipline, it's being treated like as if you want to put a new wind farm into the sea, which is not the same thing, right? But because it's just seen as a commercial activity in the sea, the same legislation applies and the same processes, maybe not quite the same legislation, but the same processes for applying for permits. So maybe sometimes the processes are not quite adequate for what we need. Again, I think here in Portugal, as far as the process goes, it's going quite well. I'm not really foreseeing any major issues. If we want to go to other countries, this is a really case-by-case thing we need to look at, because the example from the UK, it will be much, much harder to get permits. I think that we need to operate under some pilots at the beginning. Germany, I actually don't know as much about Germany, considering I'm from there.
So we have people from Germany here.
Exactly, but from partners, I heard also much, much harder for permits and these kind of things. So it's really dependent on where you go.
So
have you thought about partnering with some group like Seagrass organization in England, because they have their permits to put seagrass out, plant seagrass and do harvest? Wouldn't working with them and working under their permits be a possibility to speed up the kill?
It's a possibility once we actually have more final plans when we go, because this is I think in maybe 2-3 years time that we would expand to the UK. It's also a bit of a different, generally you have a permit for a certain area.
Yeah.
It's a nice idea. Seagrass, although the area is very different, the habitat, because you go into a soft sediment habitat. Right. We need to have our rocky reefs. So unless they have a huge permit for a general area that also has rocky reefs, this is very much in our interest. We also talk about this blue front yard approach that we are keen to implement, which is not just seaweed. It can also be oysters, seagrasses, different ecosystems that are in your blue front yard. And then we can then, like you say, partner with some organization, and ideally they already have the permits. So it's a very good point, and that's something we definitely need to look into when we spread to new countries.
Yeah, and it seems, for our, know about seagrass is a little bit easier to get all the permits, because the process, it's better known, it's better understood. There's a lot of work on this area. Yeah, that's a good point. And I like this idea of blue front yard.
That was coined by Paul back then.
Yeah,
it's like a fountain
yeah, I know that. So, well, we are going back to Luisa, and then I have a question from Milton. Hello, Milton, how are you? Nice to see you here. So Luisa, before we go to the last question from Milton, I would like to ask you about the language barriers. You've been working on São Tomé e Príncipe, even sometimes in São Tomé e Príncipe, it's difficult to speak in English, to have people from other countries, and even sometimes I've been with groups in São Tomé e Príncipe, sometimes it's a little bit challenging for them to have a conversation in full Portuguese, let's say. They always tell me a little bit about your views about language barriers, and if you expand what you're doing to other areas in Africa, for example, how you would cope with that?
Well, I have to say that most of the population speaks Portuguese, especially in Príncipe. I think everyone speaks quite well good Portuguese. On São Tomé, there are some in certain areas there are people that it's not that they don't speak Portuguese, but they feel more comfortable talking in their own language, which is Creole Fogo. But otherwise, we don't really have this problem. It happens sometimes that whenever we have, for example, some consultants working with us and they are foreigners, that we need to translate because most of the population, including authorities and so on, they don't speak English, at least fluently. A lot of people speak Portuguese, French, but not so much English. But otherwise, I mean, during the consultation meetings, we had several hundreds, like I said, over about 400 in the communities. We never had that problem because the project team based here, they all speak Portuguese. The team is comprised by some Tomeans, Portuguese, and also Brazilian. So everybody speaks Portuguese. So we don't have this issue, fortunately.
Thank you. So the final question from Milton: what can you say about the quality of the data obtained by citizens for studies focused primarily on scientific objectives? Would this be a limitation utilizing this data, or whether you should make the best possible use of it in other ways? Meaning, how, well, this is a final question for you all. I mean, how could you use citizen science to help your efforts? And if you can contribute as well for projects that intensive data project, like, for example, the digital twins of the oceans, like a two-way connection between citizens, your projects, and I mean, the wider context of data.
I can start. I mean, it depends on what the kind of citizen science data is like. I mean, you can, for some projects, you need very concrete scientific data, which I think is the case for the projects also in São Tomé and Príncipe. I think for ours and the examples I showed earlier, teaching people to identify seaweeds underwater, of course, there can be some misinterpretation, but the citizen science data should always go through some sort of screening process after, right? You just don't take the bulk of data, analyze it, and then make some decisions with it. So even that, but I think the data that we kind of want is fairly simple. So it's images, it's some form of records that we can double check. So I think for our purposes, let's say the citizen science data is never really an issue in terms of their quality. But I do appreciate if you want to contribute to a research project with citizen science data, that might be a bit more tricky, and there might be much more training involved for the citizens to actually deliver the right data.
Yeah.
That would be the point exactly that I would touch, is the training. I feel that dependent on how the citizens are trained and workshopped and familiarized with the techniques and so on, that's a really important factor. And then like also the monitorization, kind of the support system during so that the citizens are not aware of who they can reach, and ideally a scientist that they can reach in case if they ask questions and they have these doubts, and also some monitorization of how the process is going, like to improve the quality. This, as Jan said, depends really on the project and definitely on how the data is going to be used afterwards. But I think with these two factors of like more intensive training and then a more support system, network, they can be amplified. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So, Luisa, I mean...
Yes, I think it depends very much on the case, right? In our case, for example, this is one of our difficulties, that there was not a lot of scientific data available. We compiled, like I said, everything that existed, and we also collected essential data like we did habitat mapping, for example, to know exactly what we were trying to protect. But still, and we are collecting data through fissures. I think it's still specifically in our case, it's still better to do something with these data and use it than not doing nothing because we don't have any data. Until more studies, scientific studies are and these usually end up attracting more scientific interest and people coming to do more studies. But I think the most important thing when we use this kind of data, like we have been doing, is to communicate very clearly what kind of information is being used, acknowledge the potential limitations, but explaining also the value of evidence which is available, even despite uncertainty. So that's how we have been working. But of course, there's a lot still to do. And just to mention, for example, that in the case of Santa Main Príncipe is still a paradise to find new species. I was with a researcher last week that comes here very often, like every 2 years, and he just says it's unbelievable. Every time I turn, he dives. Every time I turn a stone or something, I find a new species. So it's we would never stop. We'd do anything if we would waited for the perfect data collection. But I think we have done a very good job still.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it's basically what Milton just said. I mean, it's make the best possible use of the available data, citizen data. So thank you so much for everybody. I mean, it was really, really engaging, interesting session. I mean, it was fantastic, a personal experience. That's what we are looking for. We are very much involved on let's say, progressing, implementing the mission ocean in waters in the Atlantic and Arctic, and in your personal stories, your motivation. It is very interesting for us. It's also motivates us a lot to continue in this direction of implementing the mission ocean and waters. So thank you, Eugenia. Thank you, Jan. We are supposed to have a dynamic session. Well, if you are still there, no, but you go after the hours. It's okay right now. Thank you so much. Okay, and thank you so much. So see you next Friday. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.